and then started this weird and wonderful journey of realizing I had no idea what I was doing. It was a bit dangerous, really, thinking about the way that model could have gone wrong. We realized very quickly that people didn't just want to see it; they wanted to do stuff with that data. I clicked on the website, looked at them, Googled them, and I was like, oh my gosh, these people are massive. Like, what on earth do they want with us? Generally, the craziest thing I've ever experienced, I can't even remember half of it, was that intense.
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. Before we start, I have one simple request. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app you're listening on. Today's guest dropped out of school to go into employment at the age of 17. He then went on to found and sell one of the most successful Leeds tech businesses. Listen as a chance conversation sparks a business idea, how a pivot really changed the business, the reasons for an abandoned PE raise, and how a cold email turned into a business sale. Along with the successes, there's lots of we didn't do this so well. There is so much in this episode to learn from. On today's Leeds Business Podcast, I'm delighted to have with me Jordan Appleson, founder of Hark. Hi, Jordan.
Hey, Phil, how's it going?
We're good. Now, we were just discussing you are my second youngest guest on the show, second behind Rachel Wolford, whose episode was out a few weeks ago. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at school. So let's go to lower sixth and what happened.
Oh yeah, so I was in school for quite a number of years, like any normal person, and then my passion was always software, right? So for me, I was very good at computer science and that kind of stuff at school, and then kind of got to my A levels, and it wasn't really for me. And so I suppose against maybe what my mum and dad had thought was going to be the grand plan of university and all that kind of stuff, I actually ended up being offered a job at around 16 to work as a software engineer at a digital agency in Leeds. And so fast forward a year of doing a bit of part-time work, you got to 17, end of my first year of A levels, and I was just like, you know what? I'll take that job. I'll take that nice salary, and I'll leave school with no A levels. So that was kind of where everything kind of began. I had been writing software since I was about 12, though, so it was kind of like a very natural thing for me to go in and do, really. So yeah, that was where it all started. Or I don't know, to some people like my parents, maybe it was going to end, maybe.
Okay. So where did that passion for software come from?
It's a great question. I think I was always a tinkerer when I was, 7, 8. My dad always had computers in the house that he had from work. He was actually in like graphic design, so he always had kind of good computers back in kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I used to take a screwdriver to them, to his dismay, and or try and do weird and wacky things. And I just always had a passion for kind of hardware, electronics, and software. The thing about hardware, right, is you don't want to electrocute yourself, and your parents are usually pretty, I don't know, against you taking these things apart. So software was the natural next step. I can actually make the computer do what I want without worrying about my life. And so it was always kind of like game engines or, C, C++, these kind of things when I was 12, but way over my head at the time. And I just naturally kind of was a bit of a hermit in my bedroom, servers, Linux commands, all of that kind of stuff that, I believe the term would have been script kiddie back in the early 90s. So that was me. It was kind of 2012, right? 2011 was like the renaissance of the iPhone and application development, and the way the web was being transformed into something that, as we see now, is that it was very big. We had Twitter and we had Facebook, but it was very much on this trajectory, right? Of like everyone who, I suppose, had an iPhone or had these smartphones. It was at that time where there was this almost inflection point of mass use and how people change the way that they live around technology. So it was a really good time to be doing that kind of thing, because there weren't that many software engineers in Leeds that were doing that level of digital development. It was very much websites and stuff, but I wasn't in that world. I was very much in the application domain. And so it was just a very natural thing to kind of go into, and very exciting at the time because everything was new and everything was innovative. It was just like, there's no ceiling, right, to what you can do.
So you turn up and we discussed this at Branded 3, which is a very successful Leeds digital agency. 17-year-old, if I can use the word geek.
Yeah. That's what it was.
How did that sort of fit in with, probably a business with lots of much older people?
Yeah. So originally I went in part-time to work on, applications, things for like car, like auto trader style applications that we were working on, or financial applications. But at the core of Branded 3, they were a digital marketing agency with a specialism in SEO, search engine optimization. And so there were a number of tools at the time when I joined that were like early stages internal tools to basically kind of automate and operate that process of like scraping the web, analyzing digital traffic without necessarily having Google Analytics access, that kind of thing. But they were all kind of in disparate areas. And I'd done a couple of years on the engineering team there, and Vin, the founder, and Patrick as well, the founder of Branded 3. I was one of those people that would go home at the weekend and come back with something new, right? On a Monday and be like, hey, check this thing out. This is amazing. It can revolutionize the way we do X type of analytics. And Vin and Patrick were just like, oh, wow, this is cool. Keep doing more of that. Their voices are way deeper than that, by the way, right? And as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, as you're going through that journey, you don't really understand much about like the value you're giving to, when you, especially going home on the weekend, this is not your day job. And so, after kind of doing that a couple of times and them making a lot of money off some of these tools, right? They asked me if I would like formally take over and kind of commercialize some internal products under my own kind of direction. And that kind of gave me the autonomy to kind of grow as a software engineer, but also with a bit of business acumen around like what is good for the business, how can we optimize revenue, what areas of the business can we serve with these technology and tools. And so, it was just like originally a one-man band just doing this kind of stuff. And then I hired a couple of people, and next thing you know, you're given a tiny little budget and asked to scrape the entire internet, right, every single day and figure out who's doing what. And that became a really heavy performance data and engineering challenge that I absolutely loved. And I had a lot of autonomy, but with that autonomy comes kind of responsibility not to kind of muck that up or take it in a direction where you're just kind of burning through money unnecessarily, right? So that's kind of where it started, and how I ended up being kind of head of product development there for a couple of years, and until it kind of exited, really.
I mean, there's a couple of things I'd like to dig into that. I mean, you're 17, 18, 19, whatever it might be. On one hand, how do you cope as a 18, 19, 20-year-old with that kind of responsibility? And also, how did people like Vin and Patrick manage you to bring that out of you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think at the time I didn't really. I look back, and I think my natural way of approaching something, especially when you've been given the opportunity to do something by someone, is to try and make them proud. It sounds a bit weird to say. So like a massive desire was to make a success of this thing that was I suppose given to me in that opportunity. And so when it came to being asked to do this, it was all about like talking to people, figuring out which areas of the business I could delve into. And so I never really thought about it front of mind of like, oh my gosh, like, is this a big responsibility? Am I stressed? Like, it was all like, I was so hyper focused at the time on that one or two things. Like, it was like, this is amazing. This is technology. I'm writing software. I've got autonomy. This is amazing. Let's go to KFC and get some Crush'ems, right? Which was generally like the daily thing that we did, right? Over at Leeds, in Leeds Colton, there was a KFC there. I think it's still there. And how did they manage me? And this is the interesting thing, is like Vin and Patrick were very hands off. Right, they were very hands off. It was more on I saw it as my job to every week, every couple of weeks, to be reporting, look at all this amazing stuff we are doing, and really it can't be fluff, right? It has to be like real tangible results. Otherwise, Vin and Patrick, rightly so, would come and be like, I've seen it in other areas of business. What are you doing? You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And actually, even though they're right in terms of the direction, the way of doing that might not necessarily be the right way. So as long as I was one step ahead of that, like, it was never an issue. And so for me, I think that's maybe where I learned to kind of communicate and figure out which areas are the most salient points when you're reporting on progress or managing a board or whatever it is. It's kind of where maybe I learned some of the skills. And so Vin and Patrick were very hands off, which is a good thing. Maybe not the greatest thing, depending on the kind of personality type you are, because they were always there for guidance, but maybe not as much. It wasn't never really formal or as maybe as structured as someone might want if they're trying to be mentored. I never saw it like that. But so it was a great opportunity. It was kind of like I guess I look back on it, maybe it was a sink or swim kind of thing, right? You're given all of this opportunity, but if you scattergun approach it, maybe you could squander it. But I was very fortunate that they backed me inside that business to help them achieve what they wanted to achieve. Because with respect, right, they had a goal, right, which was they're
Yeah.
building a business, they want to exit it. Part of the technology is how they achieve that. But I had no idea, right? Like at that time, I was like, no idea what that actually meant. No idea about, why you would sell a business or anything like that, or how even you would do that. I was just like, let's go, let's make things amazing. Let's delight the people who are using the tool, right? And it wasn't all easy, there were a lot of challenges that came with doing that, but it kind of gave me the experience to, I guess, take ambiguity and turn it into something concrete, maybe.
What would you say those key challenges were at that time?
I think when you're not the driving force behind revenue directly, right? Let's be honest. Like we're not selling software to end customers. That was not the tooling that we created. And the business, 80% of its revenue came from other services that were propped up, but ultimately not directly a result of that software. You have to find the right line between like what you're attempting to build for those people and how much investment you make into those, right? For example, when we went through the acquisition, there was a whole cost cutting exercise or a cost freeze, right? And actually that tool, while it was serving lots of users internally and helping generate revenue, it cost money to run. And so when someone says you need to stop scraping the web every day and switch to 3 days, you're like, what? That might save, half the cost in some of the server bills or whatever it was. I think it was actually certain APIs we were using. It did affect the performance and the usability of the product and how much it could then, be used to, win more customers or rapport. And it's those kind of challenges that, to me, as a personally, I couldn't understand why you would want to do that. Why would we make the product terrible? Like, oh my gosh, like this is such a bad idea. But I didn't realize that for every pound that was saved, that was maybe £3 in the acquisition value. It's all of this kind of stuff that you don't realize. But and equally, like, the other challenge was like, how do you build a software engineering product culture in a digital agency, right? Like a digital agency is very much, we sell days and we sell SEO and we sell time or we sell development. And so you're project managed versus being a product led organization. And I think that I think if I was doing that differently now.
So the difficult, I suppose, just to put it in a box, then the difficulty you had was you were building internal software that facilitated other people to do the commercial stuff, if that makes sense.
Correct.
So you look at it on a piece of paper, you're a cost base, but actually you contribute to what they're selling and the service they're offering and stuff like that.
And how do you attribute revenue and all of these things that I never really thought about up front, right? And maybe if I thought about them up front, maybe we would have 10x'd it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
We'll get onto the exit. I mean, obviously you weren't involved in the exit, but we'll get onto the exit. You mentioned that you pretty soon you took on a few members of staff. I'm guessing they were older than you.
I actually hired Andrew Hathaway, my co-founder of Hark, right? That's where I met Andrew, actually. Okay. So obviously we're at Branded 3. I'm running product development. I said to Vin and Patrick, I need some additional resource. He gave me a budget for 2 people. One was older. Originally, that didn't work out for other reasons, nothing to do with age, right? And then Andrew, who was even 2 years younger than me, right? Like, and so, we had these teenagers running about the office, like doing things. But yeah, I think that was my first foray into building a team, right? It's like, and deep down, like I look back on it and it was like culture fit, what are the goals? Like I did all of that naturally, but maybe not without the thought around, okay, this is what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to build a real engineering culture here, right? It was genuinely just looking for people who were like-minded, who were talented, who had the aptitude, right? And that's where I found Andrew. And then there were a couple of other people, along the way, but ultimately it was Andrew and I who led that for a period of time. And you don't need a massive team to make big waves in any technology business, whether it's internal or external. You just need the right mindset, the right, I suppose, goals that you can kind of put that dot on the wall.
Okay. So, I've exited a business and you have, and we'll get onto that. At the time at some point, I assume Vin and Patrick sat down with the team and said, "We're selling."
Yeah.
How does that feel from the other side of the fence? What was that like at the time?
It was so long ago, but I think I remember feeling like excited, but didn't know why, right? But I also, there was that element of, as things started to change, I felt a little bit like, oh my gosh, things are changing, and you know, it was just a bit uncomfortable, to be honest. And I think that was the same for everyone, right? Whether
Yeah.
you were in engineering or you were in development. And I think, it was a 3-year now they were on, right? So it wasn't just like they're in and out. We operated completely independently for those 3 years. I didn't stay to the fully end of it, right? But I stayed for the majority, of it.
Okay, let's fast forward then. Where's the flip between being an employee, an employee, to going, actually, I want to run my own business? Or was there a flip? Or, I mean, how did the business idea come about? Just talk us through all of that.
So I never really wanted to start a business when I went into that software engineering world. It wasn't really like the thing that was driving me. It was very much, I want to be part of a team. I want to be an amazing software engineer. But when you do the product development and you experience the things you experience in business, right? Like, building teams, like chasing what is a product market fit for something, whether it's internal or external. That's kind of where my passion, like in the business side of things, started to kind of shift towards. But I always wanted to do my own thing, but it wasn't in that industry. I always knew, after a period of time of doing this at Branded 3, like I was like, I want to do my own thing. Like you see all these startups coming out in the tech, it was 2012, 2013, 2014, startups here, startups there. Part of it was the naivety of, I'm going to be a startup founder, a tech founder. It's going to be amazing. We're going to do all this money and revenue, and we're going to delight people with products. And obviously, you know, later on we'll talk about it, but it doesn't really happen like that. But I'd met Andrew at Branded 3. Well, I'd met him before. We knew each other like as acquaintances, but we worked together and we were like scheming, what could we do? This would be amazing if we did this for ourselves. What could it be? And then I ended up meeting someone who had a problem in an industry, completely different, but it tickled and scratched two itches of mine. One was developing software and cloud technology, and the other was hardware. Actually, I was always into, like, with my screwdriver and circuit boards, etc. So that was very much like it tickled those two areas that I've always really wanted to do. And so I thought, you hear about all these companies raising money and writing checks and VC and this and that. I was like, I'll go do this. Just didn't really think about it too much. And Vin and Patrick, then I said to them, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go do my own thing. And they were like, what is it? What are you going to go do? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to go and raise money. It's going to be amazing. And then started this weird and wonderful journey of realizing I had no idea what I was doing. And then learning.
Okay, let's unpack some of that. So I assume, sort of sat in Starbucks and bars and pubs and sort of scribbled things on the backs of notebooks and all that sort of thing. And that this could be a great idea. So what was this guy that came along with the problem? Talk us through that, and then how that went from an idea to a business, or at least an idea to I'm going to jack my job in and start a business.
For sure. So at the time, like, I had an acquaintance who, through a girlfriend, and he was in the pharmaceutical space, and he was in the services business, and he said, there's all this compliance stuff around temperature and monitoring of cold storage, and it's all done by pen and paper, and chart recorders that have a pen on them. And I was like, that sounds crazy, like crazy. Have you seen the internet? Like, have you seen the iPhone? And so it was kind of one of those off the cuff conversations about, like, what if we could actually do something in this space where we digitize it, where we make it really easy to turn it into something where we build some hardware connected to the existing sensors that are in those systems, but get rid of the paper-based chart recorder and beam that to the cloud and charge money for it. And you get all these additional benefits, backup and, retention, and it's all safe and secure, and, all these tick compliance tick box exercises. And actually, when you looked and scratched the surface, there was a big enough market for it. I didn't really understand what that actually meant at the time, but yeah. And so between, two people I met at Branded 3 and who are long-standing friends, technology, and this other gentleman, we said, let's go do this, and started 6 months of scribbling and figuring out, what do we call the thing? Biotech Pharma Company International, right? And it was just like, and started actually working on some stuff in our own time, just some prototypes and figuring out how to do it all on our own time. And then we kind of got to the point where, like I said to Vin and Patrick, I was thinking about doing my own thing. They said, look, what is it? We'll back it. And there was no business plan. They were like, we'll back it, no questions. It was like, wow, okay, this is crazy. And then I was like, no. Oh, no. I'm going to go and raise millions of pounds in VC money. And then I didn't understand the difference between private equity, VC, angels, all of the stuff that you wouldn't expect. And then, ended up in a boardroom of a PE company with a deck that had no information about what the company was, no total addressable market, no business plan. It was just, hey, I want to do this thing. It's got sensors and compliance and IoT. And the CEO of this massive PE firm just looked at me and was just like, not for
Bye.
us. Right? Yeah. And then I realized very quickly that, and Vin and Patrick said something really interesting to me, because I was like, maybe we can work on it part-time. And Vin said something which will always stick in my head, which is like, this is not something, if you're setting up a business, it's not a part-time thing. You're either in it or you're not, right? There's no funding this part-time. And that was kind of the thing that kind of triggered the whole quitting of the job properly, and Vin and Patrick saying, look, we'll fund the first year of the business.
Okay.
And that went down well in terms of getting off the ground, but then made every mistake under the sun that you could possibly make.
Talk us through some of those mistakes. Come on.
Okay, so no business plan, no real understanding of the customers, right? Like for product market, but oddly enough, this is a funny thing. So I took what was sub £100,000 of investment for a year of runway and built hardware and a software platform, right? Which is kind of unheard of. You can't really build a hardware product very easily with not a lot of money. So I was like, great, built this thing, this box that made it really easy to connect these sensors to the cloud, found our first three customers that bought it, thanks to our, the founder that was in the pharmaceutical space. And then had a business model that was, you'll pay a few pounds a month for however many sensors, right, that you're monitoring, and realized that every pharmaceutical company might have 20, 50, 100, even 500, right? But we had no pipeline. We realized very quickly that people wanted to buy it. We didn't have any capital for hardware. Like, actually, now we've manufactured 20, we needed 100. And it was like, where do we get the capital for that from, right? And then it was, hang on a second, for us to break even and actually scale really quickly, we need 10,000 of these things monitored. And even then it's not a lot. And you realize very quickly this low volume, like low price, high volume model needs a massive sales team behind it, and actually some real thinking. But we managed to build the product. We managed to create, the hardware. We managed to ship it. People loved the product, right? And people wanted to buy more, which was great. But I just didn't have the knowledge or the expertise to take that business model further. And actually, it was a bit dangerous, really, thinking about the way that model could have not gone wrong. So all of these weird and wacky, stupid things. I was 3D printing cases in my bedroom, right? I bought a 3D printer because that's how we were making it. We designed the circuit boards, but we didn't have enough money for injection molding tooling, which was £100,000 or something, what the quote was. So I was just there, 3D printing cases and then spray painting them and shipping them to pharmaceutical companies. It was ridiculous. They're still in the field today, and they still operate, and we still have those customers today, almost 10 years on. But oh my gosh, I look back and was like, what on earth were we doing? Focusing on the wrong things, maybe. But and then we had to pivot, right? Understandably, right? We had to pivot. We couldn't sustain that model. It wasn't scalable. I think we kind of landed on our feet in the fact that we didn't go and build something and expect people to come, right? And the whole build it and they will come thing just doesn't exist. We did identify that before we started building, that there was a need, and it was something people would pay for, and there was no real decent product in the market that was scalable in that way with the hardware and the software. So all of that was tick, tick, tick. Did we do enough about how many organizations were there in the UK? Maybe not. Did we understand who our target customer profile was, and how we were going to attack that market? No, I wouldn't even know how to say those words back then, right? Um, but ultimately, so we kind of got like, that weird in between where we had the right product, a market that was big enough that big customers like pharmaceuticals, like the GlaxoSmithKlines or the Northumbrian Fiber, or whatever it was, like they had to buy this stuff. It was a compliance thing, so there was no like, no, it's a discretionary spend thing. They have to do it. So we had all of this tick, 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 but we just didn't have the right execution plan. And that's like 80% of any good business idea is going to be execution. You're going to succeed on the execution, not on the idea, right? Or even the product itself being there, right? So that's we kind of had that weird halfway house, which is good because we were able to pivot, because we got asked to do all sorts. Can we monitor radiation in uranium mines and air pollution? And, what can this cloud platform do? Because that's what we put all of our time and effort to making that cloud platform that we built kind of agnostic, because we thought we might want to grow into other spaces. So that was a good decision. But yeah, like the pivot was, and we got asked by big organizations to do other things, and even people white labeling it. People wanted to white label it, which is actually what opened up the door to us being successful, because we wouldn't have been successful if we hadn't taken that approach, really.
Okay. Let's just clarify a few things first. Just in one sentence to non-techies who are listening, what did your software do?
Yeah. Okay.
Give us that first.
Yeah. So we built some hardware and software that existed in the cloud that made it very easy to connect any sensor, industrial sensor, like a temperature device, humidity, energy monitoring, that kind of thing. Connect to it and stream that data in real time up to the cloud, where you could do all sorts of stuff like analytics, monitoring, and control. And eventually we branched out purely into energy management. So monitoring and controlling energy assets, storage, energy meters, solar farms for big organizations. And that's kind of where we ended up.
So people end up with a dashboard that can see, I don't know, 100 different fridges and what the temperature is and how much energy it's using.
That was where we started. Where we started. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then actually we realized very quickly that people didn't just want to see it; they wanted to do stuff with that data. So we wanted to like optimize the energy. How can we control our assets better to reduce our energy bill? Right. The interesting thing about the energy space is supply must always equal demand with electricity. Right. So the amount of generation must always equal the amount of load, right? How much people are using at any one time. And so that creates a whole industry, the whole energy industry, around being able to control assets based on things like real-time energy pricing, because there's a whole market behind it. And it just opened up this whole kind of space to it. And so, through that journey of Hark, we went from monitoring fridges, right, and dashboards, to being asked to do a lot of energy work, and then using like how much, how cold is something, how much energy we're using, can we move that load around, can we actually cool the fridges down a bit more for a couple of hours when the prices are cheaper, and so use more energy to store that thermal inertia in the fridges, and then actually when the prices are more expensive, just turn things off, like because there's enough thermal inertia in fridges. It was all that kind of stuff. So we had all the technology, we had hardware to connect to any industrial asset, we had a software platform that could model any sensor and controllable device, which we'd obviously, the geeks in us had wanted to do. And so it allowed us to leverage our software platform initially for big organizations to white label it. Like Schneider Electric were a big customer of ours, they white labeled it. Yeah. And then we ended up doing this for supermarkets like Sainsbury's, and we worked with Asda and Morrison's, and we worked with uranium companies. It was really, really crazy journey. And then from there, you ended up in the renewable space, because that's actually where everything went, right? It's like storage, energy storage, solar arrays, big ones, and you're building. And actually, that's how the acquisition ended up becoming a thing, which we can talk about later.
Okay. I mean, one of the things I see a lot of tech companies doing is building something, and then it's like, oh, we could do this with it. We could do this with it. We could do this with it. Oh, it could do this. It could do that. How did you sort of manage that? And I suppose it's more than just tech. There'll be businesses out there who have a product or a service that we can do here, we can do here, we can do it. How do you make that decision where to focus when there's like so much to go at?
I think this is one of the things that, for the 18 months, I was not very good at this, right? I was very much the typical story of let's do this, let's say yes to pretty much anything who will pay us money, which actually can be your downfall. It's like great, it's short-term revenue, but the long-term legacy of maintaining it kind of taking you off mission or vision is kind of actually more critical than you realize at the time. And you're always balancing this kind of weird line of existential threat to the business. Am I going to go under? Do I need more funding? Well, versus how far off are we around the scalable solution that actually gets us to 100 million in revenue a year, or whatever it is you're targeting. And so I don't think I did the best job of it. Well, I mean, it depends how you look at it. A lot of people would say, Jordan, you actually did a really good job because, you managed to navigate it and then exit and build a successful business. That's what people tell me. But actually, I look back on it and I go, oh my gosh, like too much time spent going yes and debating on whether we should or shouldn't do something, not enough focus on what are actually key. What are the key goals? Like what's our target customer profile, right? And what will we absolutely say yes to, and what will we absolutely say no to? And feeling confident in that, because actually you realize your pipeline isn't big enough to say no to some of these things. And so I think COVID came, right? Like we had quite a lot of success with Schneider and Sainsbury's at the time, and COVID came and it kind of allowed us to kind of double down on instead of furloughing anyone at that time, we actually hired quite a lot of people. Because we ended up building a lot more energy specific tooling to actually target the market a bit further. And then the Ukraine war happened and so on and so forth, and then the energy prices went up. So it was just kind of the right amount of like timing and realizing that you just, as you say, like a lot of founders will go through this, just like, yeah, we'll do everything for anyone, and it's actually realizing that that's the surefire way to, you won't necessarily fail, but you might not necessarily get to where you're going.
I think that's a key lesson. I think a lot of business owners take a long time to realize is actually saying no is often better than saying yes. And I totally agree. In the early days, it's like, shit, we've got a payroll at the end of the month. We haven't got enough money in the bank, so we have to say yes. But then you end up being a non-specialist, and you then drop by the wayside. And like you say, the other thing that people don't consider is that service thing. Yes, as you said, yes, we can build it, but then you're stuck servicing it way down the line.
And if you've not built that correctly, you're actually investing more time and resource in people to maintain that, and they're not working on the core product. And
we're going to get onto the exit, but during that growth period from startup, when there was 2, 3, 4 of you, to what size was it when you the exit?
Oh,
How many staff did you have?
So we actually only had about 20, right? So
Right.
like we were very lean as a business, and this is why people and this, our acquiring company were looking at us going, we don't understand how you've built and got to this revenue numbers and this level of technology and done all this stuff with so few people. And I think focus was obviously on the right industry,
Yeah.
but yeah, just we were about 20 people, and we actually had a period that was where we were much more. We were almost 35, and that's where you learn the hard lessons.
Yeah. So as a sorry, I'm using cliches here, but as
go for it.
sort of a tech geek turning into a CEO of a 35-man business, what were the hard lessons during that journey?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, I actually never wanted to be the CEO of the company, right? Like when we were in this room, there was like 4 people, right? And 3 co-founders and me. It was, I'll be the CTO from Andrew, and Jules was like, I'll be the chief software architect, and Ben was like, chief commercial officer, because it made sense. He was the sales guy. And it left the CEO position. I was like, oh, okay. And so lessons, so many. I mean, key lessons. I think the culture, like building the right culture early on, and making sure that you hire the right people that fit that culture. Like, this is an age-old one. Like, so it's very, very, like, everyone says it, but it's so true. The making decisions quickly and not burying your head in the sand, right? Like when you're a founder and you've built a business before, and confrontation isn't your natural go-to. I'm not saying you have to go to confrontation by default, but if you're not used to confrontation or hard conversations, those things can't linger. You kind of lay awake in bed and like, oh, how could I possibly say this to someone? Or how could I possibly let this person go? They're such a lovely person. And it's like, it's not about them like being lovely. It's about like, you're actually risking your entire business because you can't make a decision. And I think that was a really key lesson. Is like, not over time, is like going into those meetings or taking decisions quickly and effectively, not rushed, right? Not knee jerk, but genuinely, if you're going to make a decision, do it. Because actually, if you don't, you can genuinely jeopardize the culture, or you can jeopardize the financial situation of the business, which, it's very hard to pull that back when you could just make a very straightforward decision and save yourself from a lot of pain. And I think what's really important as well is when it comes to like the people side of things, there's a book, Good to Great, by Jim Collins. Everyone goes on about it, and
Yep.
it was about
It
10
affected
years
my
ago.
business as well. Yep.
Yeah. And I think it might have been Vin who recommended it to me like 8 years ago. And there's this whole thing about the bus, and you having the right people on the bus, in the right seat on the bus, and the wrong people on the like off the bus, right? And all of those things. It's not do 2 out of 3 of those things. You've got to do all 3, or it won't work. And that is so true, right? Like so unbelievably true, because the learnings I had was I actually maybe had the wrong people in the wrong seats on the bus, right? Okay, move them around, great. But one thing I did terribly, and for a period of time, was not removing the people from the bus who just shouldn't be on it, because actually it affects everyone else in ways that you can't possibly imagine. And one anecdote I have is we let someone go. It must have been 3 or 4 years ago. They were a lovely person, but they were just not at the level that we had hired them to be at, right? And they were, it was a really tough call, right? Because we did 3 months, of trying to mentor me and my senior team, trying to mentor them. How can we make this better? 3 months went on, and it was still the same thing. And in the end, we had to let this person go, and we did right by them, and made sure that they weren't left in any compromised position. But someone came to me, and who I just had no idea. Someone came to me and went, "Thank you for that." It was an engineer, and they said, some of us could not understand why this person was still in the business for so long, and it was making us feel a bit uncomfortable. And not uncomfortable in that person was making them feel uncomfortable. They were just like, "How can you let someone be in the business? This isn't like that. Isn't it just?" And so they said, "Look, you've really shown that you actually know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of leadership." And I think that's the key point is yes, you can have all the best people in the right seats on the bus, but if you have the wrong people in the wrong, not just on the bus full stop, you can actually cause the great people that you've got to leave, and that's not what you want, right? So that's probably one of a few key lessons. And to be honest, what's really bad on my part was my co-founder Andrew at the time was like, "Why is this person here? Why are you keeping this person here? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "We can give them another shot." And Andrew was just, he's right, the majority of the time, when it comes to these things. And I just, and this is the other thing is listening to other people and getting feedback is always important. But
Yep, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Right, before we get on to talk about the exit, I want to talk to our listeners and viewers about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has 2 sides to it. My side of the deal is every week, totally free of charge. I bring you inspirational, motivational, and fascinating business founders like Jordan. Your side of the deal, listener and viewer, has one thing to it. And all you have to do is recommend this podcast to one other person that you feel will get a benefit from it. That's it. That's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. So like a fair deal, Jordan?
that sounds like a fair deal.
Okay, so there you go. So give us a flavour of the size of the business, and then talk to us how the whole exit, or at least the offer, and how it all came about.
Yes, in terms of where we were, right? We'd been going 6-7 years actually about 6 years at this point, right? And we'd been through 2 years of the pivoting and finally found our feet. And we were about 20 people, 7-digit annual recurring revenue, decent growth, mostly bootstrapped, right? We only had that original investment from Vin and Patrick. We hadn't raised any other, equity, right? Obviously coronavirus had happened, and that actually allowed us to take on some cheap debt, about $500,000, to actually make sure we had bigger capital reserves if we needed, which was awesome because we didn't need to dilute. But we built such an incredibly good platform in terms of hardware and software that made it so easy for us to rapidly deploy and connect to these things that we were kind of beating out the Honeywells of the world and the Schneiders, hence why Schneider white labeled some of our technology, on really big deals, right? Which was awesome, on small teams. And then, we'd looked at investment rounds. There were a lot of, we even turned one down back in 2021, which was a whole story in and of itself. But in 2022, I got an email from my head of sales at the time being like, there's a company that want to speak to you about partnering and whatever. I can't tell if it's junk or not. I had a look at the email. It says, "Hi, we're SolarEdge, the #1 solar inverter company in the world by revenue or whatever. And we're looking for companies in the commercial and industrial space, because that's what we were, commercial and industrial. We don't do residential, to partner with on like energy management." So I clicked on the website, looked at them, Googled them. I was like, oh my gosh, these people are massive. Like, what on earth do they want with us? Are they just kind of, is this a scam? Like, what is this? Like, there's something isn't right. And we just kind of a few months before just kind of said no to an investment round, and it caused like a big shakeup for me, like in how that ended up, us saying no to that, right? And how that came about. And you know what? I just thought, sod it, right? We'll just go in eyes wide open, be completely brutal with these people. And on the first call, "Hi, what is it that you want with us? Like, you're massive. Are you trying to steal our ideas? Like, what is it? Like, this doesn't make any sense." And I was on with the VP of strategy you're on at the time. And I think he was just like, "No, look, genuinely, we're looking for companies to partner with and either invest or partner with." And I was like, "Look, being completely honest, this has to be absolutely right. And the commercial terms have to be right. Like, I'm not jeopardizing my business for this." And so this was kind of in like May of 2022, right? May of 2022. And so we had like several phone calls around, and I was like, business first, forget the tech, business first. What's the commercial opportunity for us? Like, tell me how you think this is going to work. And then about, 6 or 7 meetings in, we're between half an hour and 45 minutes. And I was very open. I was like, look, I'm just going to be open with our numbers, going to be open with everything, just because what have we got to lose at this point? And they said, like, would you be open to an acquisition? And at one point, just passing comment in a call. And I was just like, in the time, I was like, you know what? Nothing's off the table. Nothing is off the table. I hadn't planned on selling the business right now. We're doing really well. We're growing. Everything's fine. Like, if it makes sense, it makes sense. But we're not at that point yet. Anyway, they flew us out to the headquarters, 4-5, what was it? May, June, July. It was like, it's kind of like August time, right? We're flying out to the headquarters. It's a 5,000 person organization. SolarEdge are absolutely huge, right? They are massive. The S&P 500 constituent at the time. I didn't really realize how big what I was getting myself into. So me, my 2 co-founders who were still in the business at the time, that's Jules and Andrew, and Mike, my chief commercial officer, we flew out to HQ. Got 3 days, first meeting, 7 people in a boardroom, grilling us. No idea who any of them were. Like, no agenda, no nothing, just like grilling us on technical and this and that. I was like, okay, eyes wide open, whatever. One guy looked like, who's lovely, by the way, like I got to know him very well, but didn't know him at the time. Looked like he could kill me with his thumb. Like he was stern, and he was just one of those. I was like, oh my gosh. And then, so then when we go out for dinner with a couple of them, and then I start like looking at the management team and the founding team of this $15 billion behemoth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I should have asked who was in the room beforehand, because this is all the people that, it's like foundings and VPs, like it was really crazy. Second day, they kind of take us to their factories and show us everything. Had a lovely day out. They really wanted to show us like what the company was about. And then the third day, we're sat in a boardroom and they just throw up a slide going, so we want to buy you. Right. And in full acquisition, like here's some bullet points around some of the terms we're thinking. And this is, I'm sat next to Jules, Andrew, and Mike in this boardroom, and immediately going through my head, I'm like, I hope they're keeping a straight face. They better be keeping a straight face. Right. And so, that was, August, September, and then literally got the term sheet within a few weeks, and the deal was signed and done on Christmas Day 2022. It was literally the most aggressive acquisition I think people have seen. Like even the legal teams that we got involved literally signed the deal on Christmas Day, right? No joke. I was literally sat down, everyone sat down just about to eat their Christmas dinner. We're getting WhatsApps from people all over the world being like, we need to sign now. Like, it's like, what on earth? It's Christmas Day. Like our legal team were just like, we've never done a deal on Christmas Day before. I was just like, okay, cool. And so it was just like a bit of a whirlwind. And there were a lot of different reasons for why a company would want to buy us in that space, and where we are today in the world with energy and renewables, and even what happened in Spain with the grid, the massive grid in Portugal and the Iberian Peninsula with the grid outages. one of the reasons why technology like this needs to exist and needs to be heavily deployed globally. So that's the story. I mean, there's so
Wow.
much I've cut out in between, but it was just the most crazy experience of, people say, no, acquisitions take, 6 to 12 months, and actually from what seemed the first email in May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, you're talking about 7 months, but
Yeah.
realistically from term sheet to acquisition, it was, I think we signed it on, I think we actually signed term sheet on October, like the 17th or something ridiculous. And like, I think, we
Yeah.
had it for a few weeks and we moved back and forth, but from term sheet to exit, like actually signing away the company and saying, yeah, we're part of SolarEdge now, it was, I guess that's more like 10 weeks, but generally the craziest thing I've ever experienced, I can't even remember half of it, was that intense, right?
You've just been through all of that. I mean, I'm always scared to ask the question. Talk us about the investment round that didn't happen.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there's an interesting thing about raising money. No one believes in your business as much as you do, right? That's the number one thing. When you're thinking about all these people that want to back you. And Vin and Patrick were very, very good advisors. So that you need, if you've set up a business and you take an investment, you need a Vin and Patrick on your side because they are tough but fair, right? That's what you need. You need people who have got business acumen, been through it and done it before, people who will challenge you, and people who aren't afraid to genuinely put you in your place, right? And I think I needed a lot of that as a young, boisterous, naive idiot. And so Vin and Patrick were always saying, we don't need to raise any money. If you need any more money, if you need to raise money, you can come to us. They've exited business. They've got money, and that was true, right? But we got to the point where we're talking about check sizes of 3 million, 4 million upwards, right? And obviously that's a different level of risk. And so we got to the point where actually our business could do that, right? Like we could command an investment like that. And at this time, the this was just after COVID, or just as COVID was coming out of it, and the multipliers on investment rounds were just ridiculous. So, and we weren't asking for anything, and so we had two big names as investment, like who wanted to do a co-investment round, a big FTSE 100 like investment arm, and a PE house, like a VCT type house in the north. I'm not going to name who these people are. And we signed a term sheet, went through everything. They said, right, let's start hiring for something like 3.2, 3.3 million of funds to try and grow the business further. And they were like, start hiring now, sign the term sheet. So I increased costs. I was like, we don't have the money yet. We're profitable. Okay, we'll start spending some money. And then, you're kind of 6 weeks into the due diligence process, hasn't already started yet, and people are saying, it's mainly the P house saying, we kind of want to change some of the terms of the term sheet. Okay, we looked at it first time, not particularly like happy that we're changing terms right now, but okay. Then several more weeks passed. Oh, they want to change the terms again. The other party, the FTSE 100, just wanted to get the deal done. They were like, we need to go. This is, and in the end, like there was a lot of discussions, and they wanted to change the terms again. Right, like this is, and at this point, the FTSE 100 went, look, we can't get into bed with these people, because like if this is what they're like before we've even actually done the deal together, like this, we don't like it. So we want to do the deal, but their thesis was they have to co-invest with another. If you can find someone else to go alongside of this round, we're still on. And obviously, I'd increased costs, and we're 6 months down the line at this point. I'd increased costs to the point where we're actually burning cash now. Thankfully, we had good cash reserves, and then it got to kind of like summer, right, of 2021, and I was like burning not huge amounts of money, but we were on a 50, 60, 70 grand a month burn, which is actually a lot of money for business. Like that's like all our runway gone in very, very quick succession. And so I had to make the first time ever, I had to actually start cutting back the team, and that was probably the hardest decision of my life. But I'm glad that I'm so glad we didn't do that round, right? Like, this is where the decisions to actually cut people, I spent 3 weeks making that decision instead of, a few days just going, this is what it has to be, because I was too busy trying to figure out how to save their jobs rather than save the entire business, right? Which, I was gonna say one other lesson, which is maybe what the sorry, Mike Clark, if you're hearing this, but because I like Mike, right, and we have a good relationship as acquaintances. But if someone's coming to you offering you money as from a VC, they are selling you money. They are salespeople, right? They ultimately, right? They are literally selling you because they are selling product, right? And you need to be able to determine who are genuinely wanting to back your business because they believe in the business and who is just selling you an investment. And that's something to be very careful about as a lesson learned, because too often founders lose their businesses by getting into bed with the wrong people. I've never worked with YFM, by the way. I know we're talking about Mike Clark, but just to be clear, it wasn't YFM, right? Just I'm saying sorry to Mike because he was always very good to us, and we did discuss doing a deal at one point, but it never happened.
It brings us to the how-to that you're going to do today. So tell us what your how-to is and how to do it.
For sure. So being through an acquisition, we have a different culture to the HQ, and I wouldn't say I've perfected this because I'm still going through it, but ultimately it's how to build culture in that post-acquisition space, right? You've been acquired by a big behemoth. You have your culture. That is a very different culture to what you're going into. How do we keep people motivated when things are actually changing in a way that some people won't like? And so here are a few tips. So number one, acquisitions are kind of like transplanting organs, right? So organ rejection is real, therefore cultural rejection is real, and no one wants to be like completely absorbed by the big behemoth, right? So that's something to bear in mind. So acknowledge it. This is something that we did terribly, I'll be honest. Don't pretend that nothing's changed. People will notice pretty much everything, so acknowledge it. So logos changing, org charts shifting. What is my place in the organization? Acknowledge it upfront. Step one. Find a way to create cohesion. Step two. This is step two. So create like shared cadences, shared rituals, whatever you want to call it, which blends kind of both culture of the existing business that you're going into and your own culture. So it doesn't have to be the same habits, but create new habits together. That has worked really well in places where we've actually done this, because that makes people feel like it's an us, not a them and us, right? It's just a collective us. Step three, still preserve the DNA of the company. So preserve the identity of who or what it is you came from. So your team names or certain traditions, like we have Happy Hark, right, which is like a weekly thing, and Nikki in HR also does these amazing Friday night pub quizzes she sends around. Like all of these traditions and working styles, just you can keep them the same in places. Try and preserve some of that. Step, I'd say 4, storytelling. Why did the acquisition happen? What's new? Why is it new? You've got to continue to use storytelling to connect people to like the mission that you're on, right? It's like, okay, we're Hark and we have all this technology, and SolarEdge acquired us because actually we want to take our great technology and put it in the hands of as many people in the world as we possibly can. How are we going to do that? Well, we have this amazing smart software. We're now able to bake this into the actual core products in energy storage. You guys are going to be responsible for one of the most important product lines in commercial industrial segment for SolarEdge for the next 3 years. How amazing is that, right? And how are we going to do it? It's that kind of thing, which is actually genuinely the truth, like, which is amazing to be part of. Step 5, keep an eye on the quiet people. Watch for silence. So when people go quiet, that generally gives you like a signal that people maybe don't feel safe in there, that they can't speak up, or they're disengaged. And you're not gonna keep everyone, right? And that's okay, but you can do as much as possible to find a way to understand why people don't feel like safe. Why don't people feel like they can continue to be open? And so those are kind of like the 5 areas I would focus on. And I suppose to kind of wrap it all up, you don't inherit like culture, like, you have to kind of don't even want to say rebuild it. Like you kind of want to, we called it a reverse integration, right? With reverse culture integration, right? Which worked well in isolation in places, but actually created a bit of a disconnect in places that maybe looking back on it could have been done way better. And so I suppose if you've done this well, you start to feel like, or you start to see people stop saying Hark and SolarEdge in memes. The Hark team will do this. The SolarEdge team will do that. No, you say the team name will be doing this. And that's when you start to realize like you are one group. The culture is starting to kind of blend into something that is actually a greater sum of its parts. And so those are kind of the areas. So let me just kind of recap on that. So acknowledge the weird and wonderful. Don't pretend nothing's changed. Create some shared cadences, shared rituals, whatever you want to call it. Preserve the identity of your own organization in ways, but not too like with no walls up. Continue to use storytelling for kind of getting the mission across to the entire team. Keep an eye on people who are silent, because those are the people who don't feel safe. And remember to have fun.
That's great. That is really, really great, because they're all real life examples that, hopefully those who are listening who want to be acquired will take with them when they are acquired. That's great stuff, Jordan. Before we go, I ask all our guests to give us a shout out for another Leeds business. So, Jordan, who are you going to give a shout out to?
I'm going to give a shout out to Cast Rooms. Cast Rooms are a really interesting technology company that are trying to connect music with people in a different way. That's the typical kind of gig economy. And Mitali's done an amazing job at kind of pushing her vision, right? And she's someone I've mentored I wouldn't even say briefly, probably for a year, to kind of take her hopefully through some of the harder bits that she went through. But that business is still going, and the passion she has for music is why I'm giving her this shout out. Check out Cast Rooms, just Google it. It's actually a really interesting technology platform if you want to go and see a gig, but from your room, and be part of the actual gig, but actually at home. It's a really interesting platform for that. And so I wish her all the best, and yeah, check it out.
Okay, there'll be a link to Mitali's Cast Room in the show notes. Jordan, it's been absolutely fantastic. We could probably go on for another hour or so, but I think the listeners might start switching off. So thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, Phil. This has been awesome.
So that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you hit the follow button so every new episode gets sent straight to your phone. See you next week.